Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District Regular Board Meeting of Tuesday, August 24th to order. Today, provincial health officers announced that we will now require masks to be worn again in public places. Also, locally, we have drop-in vaccination available at Florence Filberg, but we also have the Vax van that's traveling around the valley. So on August 30th, the Vax van is going to be in Comox Center Mall from 1 to 6. August 31st, they're going to be in Courtney Superstore and the same times. And September 1st, it will be at the Cumberland Village Square. And I would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And today we're going to read Article 39 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples have the right to have access to financial and technical assistance from states and through international cooperation for the enjoyment of the rights contained in this declaration. And with that, we move to the in-camera recommendation. Hillian and McCullum, thank you. And we will be moving in camera following the regular meeting according to section 91E of the Community Charter. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Let's go. Oh, Director Hillian, you still have a question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Is it in order to ask a question relative to your opening remarks?
Sure, I'll allow that.
Okay, well, first of all, I believe the mask mandate actually takes effect tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My second question is whether staff have determined if the vaccine mandate applies to our meetings. Because I believe meetings and conferences were listed among the activities that we're going to require vaccination proof.
Thank you very much for the question, and we'll get back to each of the directors after this meeting on that. I'll consult with our HR people that are working with those issues through our staff and trying to inform them, but we'll include directors in the communications that we have.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So the in-camera was carried, and we're on to adoption of minutes from August 10th. Mayor and Cole Hamilton, thank you. Any questions about those minutes? And all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And there is business arising from minutes. Comox Valley Regional District Board from August 10th. So we have a recommended motion. Hillian and Hamir, thank you. And it's subject to the receipt of an approved Comox Valley Regional District and Comox Valley Economic Development Society agreement to transfer the Visitor Center assets and liabilities from CVRD to the CVRD. The board rise and report on this August 5th, 2021 staff report that provides an update on the finalization of the 5-point plan for the Comox Valley Economic Development Service. And all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And we're on to delegations. And today we have the Comox Valley Airport Commission. We have Mike Atkins, the CIO, and Martin Crilly, the chair. And we welcome them. Amir and Grant, thank you. And Mike and Martin?
Yeah.
You can step up to the podium.
Yeah, oh, right, sure. Thank you, Chair Kettler. Delighted to be here. By way of introduction, my name is Martin Crilly. I'm the chair of the Comox Valley Airport Commission and have been so for the last year and a half, having served on the board for the last 5 years. I actually do have a little bit of a history with the regional district because way back many moons ago, I did serve on the Area B Advisory Planning Commission when Barbara Price was the director representing Area B. It's my pleasure to introduce to you for an approximately 10-minute presentation followed by your questions and answers. Mike Atkins. We were very fortunate to attract a senior executive of Mike's caliber to serve as our CEO starting last January. He's been doing a great job, and of course, it's been very trying times, more of which later. I'd like to hand straight over to Mike, and then after his presentation, Q&A. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Grieve?
Ma-
Go ahead.
thank you very much. Just for the record, this is not going to air. There is no camera on the podium. Thank you.
Okay, for the benefit of the viewers, we'll ask the delegation to sit at the desk so that the camera can find them. Yeah.
So is this me live?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be able to present to you today. Next slide, please. The agenda, I'm going to move through it at pace based on the 10 minutes. I'm going to go through Cvac's goals and values, current situation and outlook, board appointment process, and economic development. Next slide, please. The mission of the Comox Valley Airport Commission, and in fact, the airport itself hasn't changed since inception. It's to provide safe and efficient air facilities and enable the economic development of the Comox Valley. Our vision is to be the aviation gateway to the North Island. Next slide, please. Our values, for those of you that attend our annual public or nominating entity meetings, as well, haven't changed since inception. Safety is paramount in everything in the aviation sector. We have quality as our guiding principle in terms of showing the airport to be the pride of ownership. And I think that shines through. And sustainability, understanding that aviation is a challenge in the current environment with regards to carbon. We do what we can to offset that, and we'll speak more about that as we move forward. The goals from the 2016 to 2021 strategic plan are to expand air service, maintain a viable master plan, remain financially viable, and attract and retain our talented workforce. All of that has come under some degree of stress over the last number of months, 20 months or so. But we are about to emerge from this pandemic and have survived reasonably well. Next slide, please. If you look at the current situation, 2021 seat capacity is increasing over last year, and which was the significant down year, but still remains much below where we were in 2018 and 2019. Sorry, that should be 2018, 2019. What we're seeing right now is for last fiscal year, we saw 66,000 passengers through the terminal. That's contrasting to about 400,000 passengers a year before the pandemic. But things have definitely started to return in July with 18,000 passengers, up from just 7,000 passengers in the month of June. Next slide, please. Routes and frequencies are starting to come back. WestJet has been the prime leader with 2 times daily service to Calgary. We basically kept the Calgary service almost throughout, but they've returned their Edmonton service, they've returned their Vancouver service, and they've introduced a new non-stop service to Toronto. Air Canada was absent from the terminal for many months, but has now returned their Vancouver service, albeit at less frequency. And Pacific Coastal also remained through us almost throughout, and they maintain good service to Vancouver. Next slide, please. Future outlook. Well, the crystal ball is broken. Everybody's saying that recovery to get back to 2019 levels are going to be 3 to 5 years, but that's obviously with the developing situation, the Delta variant, 4th wave, international vaccination rates are all having an impact on how quickly traffic returns. There are outstanding questions about business travel, how soon it will return, if it will return, if in-person meetings will will be replaced by Zoom. So it's very hard to look into the future. Next slide, please. Financially, however, 2019 or 2020 was a difficult year. We ended up losing money, not surprisingly. However, we're in the enviable position by being on the Canadian Forces base and the fact that our costs are limited. So therefore, we only lost approximately 300,000. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy was helpful in keeping our staff fully employed throughout, and that's allowed us to expand back to a good operational pace as we've come out of the pandemic, not having to rehire. We are also fortunate to have received a grant of $360,000 from the province to support our ongoing operations. And as recently announced, we're the recipient of a $1 million plus grant from the federal government as we aim to make changes to the terminal building in light of COVID-19 and public safety to expand the social distancing within the terminal, expanding the hold room, moving the pre-board screening to a larger area so we can get more separation there. And that will require a small addition to be built for storage. Next slide, please. Moving on to the board of directors, Cvac has 9 directors, 5 nominated by local government, 1 by the Comox Valley Chamber, 2 at large, and 1 previously by CVEDs. The CVEDs will be transitioning to ? That's something that the board has yet to consider based on the timing of CVEDs wrapping up. Of the directors, 3 of them will have their 9-year maximum term expire next year / the very beginning of the following year. So we're moving into a period whereby we'll be looking for 3 more of the local government directors. Next slide, please. In terms of our Cvac, what you see there on the right is the governance of the airport. In terms of the board appointment process, we just went through a selection for a director at large. We went out to the wider community with a public affairs campaign. We got over 20 files. We shortlisted those. We interviewed and then selected what we thought was the best candidate, or I should say the board. The hiring committee of the board did. We're hoping to use a similar strategy next year for the 3 vacancies with some changes. We're suggesting that we advertise along with the nominating entities for openings, that we shortlist a list of candidates, that we send it out to the nominating agencies for concurrence, and then the board will make the selection based on that shortlisted and vetted and endorsed list. There is some caveats. We have to have 1 member from Comox, 1 member from Courtney. That is currently covered off with our current directors and will be covered off, so that's not a problem upcoming. And then the speed at which we do it is obviously interesting or challenging, I should say, with the 4 different government entities having to endorse the list to get that back in a timely manner is always a bit of a challenge. Next slide, please. Quickly on the economic development, the Valley, there's been tons of studies done about this, about how much an airport adds to the economic development of the Valley, how much business it brings in, and I won't bore you with any of the figures. Suffice it to say, the fact that we're here does facilitate the travel to and from the Comox Valley. Next slide. The challenge we've had with the rolling up of CVEDs is the fact that it's difficult for us to determine who to work with now in the local community in terms of economic development, and specifically in terms of a DMO and a destination marketing organization. But we do some of our own local marketing, but we don't have the reach or the experience to go out to the wider catchment areas, Alberta mainly, Toronto a little bit now with that direct flight. And so it's become challenging to determine who to work with now that CVEDs as an entity is wrapping up. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my presentation. There is much more information available on the Comox Valley Airport's website, and we stand ready to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. And we do have a question from Director Hamir.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you both, Mike and Martin. I'm really impressed with the presentation and glad to see your numbers are starting to rebound. I'm curious if you could, I have couple of questions about your carbon offset. If you could maybe go into a little bit more detail around what you're doing around that, because I do see that as a really big hindrance to many people traveling now that they've not been traveling for a year and a half, and with climate change becoming kind of at the forefront of the big issues today. And then the second question, I don't know if this is something staff have any insight on around a new DMO or TBI, if that, what organization that the airport could connect with, but I'll let you answer the first.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of the carbon offset, we're to the point where we're searching out a company, and we think we found one to help us do a carbon audit, because it's hard to determine where you're going if you don't know where you're starting from. And the challenge we're having as an airport is what do we account for, and what is the airline's responsibility? What is the traveler's responsibility? What is, for that matter, the employee's responsibility? One of the things I've done in my research is determine that you may have to capture the carbon associated with your workforce getting to and from work. Well, then the lines become very blurred at that point, because then it becomes an issue of transit and road structure and driving versus public transit. And is that the airport's responsibility? Is that this body's responsibility? Who is it? So we're seeking professional advice to start with a carbon audit so that we know where our starting position is. And at that point, we can launch into a plan to reduce it. We have made differences. We've changed almost all the lighting at the airport to LED in order to lower power consumption. So we're making small power smart type changes that we've done, but we've never done it from a carbon offset perspective. So that's our next step.
Thank you. I think this board particular may be quite interested in your transportation analysis of your staff, and that we are the organization to deal with transit. So that type of data, though, is something that would be very helpful in us making decisions. So if I could encourage you to go that far in doing your audit, that would be really beneficial. And then second question, I don't know if staff have something that they can get back to Cvac on what organization can support.
Sure, the staff can be available for the Airport Commission in their consideration of how they want and where they want to go with CVETs no longer being around. If they want to pursue some other form of membership through the regional district or otherwise, we'll be there to help them.
Great, thank you. Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions, maybe three. Hopefully I can squeeze them in. The first one was around the passenger, I guess, makeup or configuration. I'm assuming obviously the pleasure customers are way down, but I was wondering if you kept any stats on kind of the business industry side of things. The reason I ask is I know several people who travel from Alberta who have business here, and they say that they're busier than ever. And certainly we've seen our construction locally has not waned. And I just wondered if you saw a huge decrease. We still have many people going to Fort Mac to work, et cetera. I just wondered what you were seeing in terms of that component of the passenger, if the primary decline was, did it impact that population much?
We don't have any stats per se, but anecdotally, I can tell you by the looking out the window check that through the majority of the pandemic, or since I started in January, it was quite obvious to see that the majority of travelers were essential travelers for work, just based on their dress. That you could tell that they were going to the camps. In that regard, we did lose out a little bit because we lost Air Canada service. There was a lot of people that had to go down to Nanaimo to catch that Air Canada service,
Right.
but we still did see a lot of those on WestJets.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. And another question was around First Nations representation on the board. Do you have any, do you have allowance for particular fields of interest or on the board makeup? I just thought that that might be something good to consider. I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Not sure if this is working or not, but maybe you can hear me.
You could try his mic if you don't mind next to
Okay,
you. Go
thanks.
ahead.
Thanks for the question. There's nothing in our bylaws that calls for First Nations representation, though in fact, in a sense, we do have it. In fact, the most recent director appointed is Rich Hardy,
Right.
who is a councillor of the Comox First Nation. So that is our connection. But we also celebrate our First Nations. Actually, in our terminal, you'll see there's the artwork there. So we do feel the connection. So I would say there's no formal governance structure that includes First Nations, other than, of course, through the jurisprudence and the decisions that have been made through our courts, of course, that we are, like everybody, subject to. But perhaps that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just thought in terms of also the different government, designates, Comox First Nation has a council as well. So I was just curious about that. Can I squeeze one more quick one in? Go ahead. This one's completely unrelated. It's regarding the fire that was out at the runway recently in early August, I believe. And someone made a comment to me, that the jet was circling, waiting to land or whatever. And I know that there's only certain runways on the island that can accommodate those larger jets. So I was just curious what happens in a situation where would those flights divert to? Because Campbell River, my understanding, doesn't have the right runway for every aircraft.
No, and as a matter of fact, that airplane, except in an emergency, could only land at us, Nanaimo, and Victoria. I think the reality of the situation is if the fire hadn't been brought under control, allowing the airplane to land, it would have had to divert probably to Vancouver, and then they would have moved the passengers after.
Right.
But yeah, they were in the hold for about an hour, and they had another 40 minutes. They could have stayed there waiting for the situation to get under control.
Yeah, no, it did seem like it was, of some significance in that regard. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And we have a Director Grant.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I used to get my monthly call from Fred regarding parking, and I think COVID gave us a bit of a reprieve on that, but I know there's been some recent activity out on the industrial lands by you guys, and I'm wondering if that's beginning to solve itself, or, I'm from Comox, so I'm just wondering if there's anything you need from us to solve that, or if it's still an issue.
Thanks for the question. As you'll know, with the passing of the stormwater management plan for Northeast Comox, it looks like the subdivision of the property can finally move forward, and then we can procure the property, or hopefully procure the property directly adjacent to the airport. COVID has fixed to a certain degree or delayed our parking challenges I go back to the crystal ball being broken for a number of years. Don't know how long that is. But it does look that there's movement there, and we are working with the various parties involved to see if we come to fruition. So thank you.
Thanks. Next, we have Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks both for the presentation. I first wanted to acknowledge Mr. Crilly. Although we haven't met, I've seen you on the local stage, I think most recently in Les Mis. And so I know that you're involved in service to the community other than just at the airport, but I did want to thank you and the board members for the service that you provide.
Thank you. Inspector Jadet,
That's right, yes.
Bad guy.
I thought you were terrific. But my question relates to the economic development aspect. And of course, we all know that the airport is a significant driver for the community. We've seen the increase, just for one example, I remember when WestJet started flying here from Calgary, the number of people who were coming out to go to the ski hill and different things like that, and the increase in imports from that particular area. But I'm just wondering what spin-off industry have we seen develop, or might we see develop as a result of the airport and the expansion that's going to take place? To what extent are we seeing spin-off industry in the community that might be creating local jobs?
Yeah, that's hard. We're a little different than most airports. If you look at Victoria, for instance, large land mass, large space, usually an industrial complex associated with it. And you'll probably have seen in the press recently that Amazon has decided to locate a package sorting facility near there. We've had some discussions with parcel companies, and the economics just don't make sense for the Comox Valley. We have too many parcels coming in and not enough leaving. So the planes come in full and don't leave full. And so it's much more beneficial for them to move their packages, move their freight down island and bring it up by truck. What we have seen is we do see some shipment of seafood out of Comox, but again, it's more economical to pack a whole trailer, to take it on a ferry and to go to Vancouver, where it's going to be transshipped from all over the world from there. I think the biggest impact that we see on business is tourism, for one, and knowledge-based businesses, smaller enterprises, because they still need to get out there and they still need to contact clients. One of our directors has got a very successful tourism business, and she can do that because she can fly through the airport and get to all the places that she has contracts to make presentations. So I think the airport, and I have no studies to back this up, but anecdotally, I would say that we support the knowledge-based economy in the local valley. And, what we have seen through COVID, as the bigger centers have emptied out and people are working remotely, they're coming to places like Comox, which is unfortunately driving up property values, but they're coming to places like Comox. And I think at some point it's going to return to, they're going to have to go back to the office. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month, but we'll facilitate that through the airport and having a direct link to Vancouver or Calgary or Edmonton or wherever travels may take them. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll just follow up briefly. We recently had an issue with the long-term lease for the air park in Courtenay. And of course, one of the arguments in favor of giving them security of tenure was that there would be spin-off in terms of aircraft maintenance and that type of thing. So I'm just wondering if there is any business relationship between the air park and the airport as such.
Well, again, we're in a unique circumstance where we're resident, where our landlord is the base. But there is, a lot of the area in Comox around the airport is zoned light industrial. And so if there was an opportunity, some of that will have direct airside access through the back of our ramp. So there's a possibility there, but nobody I've seen at this point has taken it up on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks very much.
Okay, I don't see any further lights on. So thank you so much for your presentation and for answering all our questions this evening.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And all in favor of receipt? And anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. So moving on to reports. The first report is Electoral Area Service Committee minutes from August 9th. Thanks, Grant and Amir. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And there's a recommendation.
Move one.
Grieve and Grant, thank you. And the recommendations regarding reducing the frontage for a property on Island Highway South. It's a vote of the areas. Any further discussion? And anyone opposed? I'll give our online participants a little bit of time. Okay, that's carried unanimously. On to recommendation 2.
And Madam Chair, before you consider this, as it's a matter pertaining to the Agricultural Land Commission and my wife is chair, I just remove myself from these decisions. So if there are any questions of staff, Alana Macaulay is here to answer them.
Thank you, Russell. So recommendation 2 is regarding non-adhering residential use application for ALR lands on Headquarters Road. And sorry, I had Grant and Hillian, thank you. And it's about the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. We're on to recommendation 3.
I'll move
Grant
3.
and Reeve, thank you. And this recommendation is regarding an exemption for the floodplain management bylaw for a property on Riverbend Road. Again, it's a vote of the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried unanimously. Or on to recommendation 4. Grant and Moran, thank you. This is regarding a development permit on Macaulay Road. Again, it's a vote of the areas. Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. We're on to recommendation 5. Grant and Hamir, thank you. And this is regarding a number of bylaws and getting assent voting on Denman and Hornby Islands, high-speed internet. And is there any further discussion? Okay, it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. Thank you. We're on to recommendation 6. Thank you, Grant and McCollum. And it's about a question on the assent voting ballot. And it's a vote of the full board. Any further discussion about the question? Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried unanimously. We're on to recommendation 7. Cole Hamilton and Grant, thank you. And this is a notice of assent voting for bylaws 672, 673, and 678. Again, regarding high-speed internet, it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. On to recommendation 8. Cole Hamilton and Grant, thank you. And this is that we're appointing Jake Martins as the Chief Election Officer and Lisa Dennis as Deputy Chief Election Officer for the assent voting process. Again, it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried unanimously. We're on to recommendation 9. Thank you, Grant and McCollum. And this is in regard to committing $6,500 to the Denman Island feasibility study and $9,500 for Hornby Island feasibility study. It is a vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. We're on to recommendation 10. Grant and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And this is regard to bylaws being adopted and allowing for permissive tax exemption. And it's above the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And we're on to recommendation 11. Grant and Hamir, thank you. And again, it's regarding permissive tax exemption for the year 2022 for Union Bay Historical Society. And it's for the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. On to recommendation 12. Grant and Cole Hamilton, thank you. And this is in regards to unspent funds from the Community Works. And it's a vote of the full board. Any further discussion? And all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. So we're on to item 2, which is the Comox Valley Sewage Commission minutes for August 10th. Thank you, Hillian and Grant. And it's both full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And we're on to the Water Committee minutes from August 10th. Grant and Moran. Vote of full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. We are on to bylaws and resolutions for first, second, and third. The first one we have is bylaw number 672, Denman and Hornby Island High-Speed Internet Contribution Service. Hillian and Grant, thank you. For first and second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Grant and Cole Hamilton for third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that is carried. On to item 2, which is bylaw 673, Denman and Hornby Island High-Speed Internet Loan Authorization. Grant and Moran, thank you. For first and second, below the full board, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Hillian and Grant for third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that is carried. On to item 3, bylaw 676. It's the property tax exemption bylaw for Sunnydale Golf Course. Grant and McCullum for first and second. It's above the full board.
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Grant moved third and seconded by Cole Hamilton. And all in favor? Anyone opposed? And that is carried. Item 4 is bylaw number 677. It's a property tax exemption bylaw for Union Bay Historical Society. Hillian and Grant have moved first and second. Again, a vote with full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Grant and Cole Hamilton have moved third. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that is carried. So we don't have any new business.